Dramas of the Courts. The law awards and the law punishes.
Presenting true-life jury trials, stories in fictionized form typical of the unfolding human dramas of the courts. Tonight, the mystery of Magwick Manor.
And that's how it started. A siren screaming through the night. An ambulance rushing through hedge-lined country roads to a man already dying, answering a frantic phone call from an impressive-looking house that stood on the hill overlooking the usually quiet little village. But the ambulance was too late. The man was dead. That's when they sent for me, Inspector Richard Cole, CID. The man had been murdered.
In here, Inspector. We can talk in here.
And you're?
Robert Magwick, Inspector...
Cole. You related to the dead man?
Brother.
What happened?
I don't know. You see, it was all so sudden. Don was all right 1 minute, and then...
Potassium cyanide is quick, Mr. Magwick.
Cyanide?
Yes. I picked up the police surgeon's report just before I came up here.
That's impossible, Inspector. Don poison? How could he be? I tell you...
So far, you have told me nothing. That's the reason I'm here, to find out things.
I'm sorry. Well, you can imagine how I feel. We were in the drawing room.
We?
Yes. There was Mother, Jill, that's Don's wife, Don and I.
Mm-hmm.
And we were having cocktails. Suddenly, Don collapsed, crumpled up.
Go on.
I rang for a doctor and an ambulance, and... Well, that's all.
I see.
This talk of poison, it's fantastic. Why, we were all there. Our drinks came out of the same cocktail shaker. There must be some mistake.
Sorry, but there's none. Your brother died from potassium cyanide poisoning.
But how?
The glasses haven't been analyzed yet, but there isn't any doubt that it was in his cocktail. Probably placed there after it was poured out.
But Don... Who would do such a thing?
That, Mr. Magwick, is what I intend to find out. Well, as you can imagine, the whole village was seething with scandal. A murder in the Magwick family was something to talk about. Before old Simon Magwick died, they were the wealthiest family in the county. There was still plenty of money there. They used to entertain lavishly one time, and that was before Mrs. Magwick became ill. They lived quietly nowadays. I looked forward to meeting Mrs. Magwick. I'd heard a good deal about her.
Well, young man, go ahead. Ask me your questions. I'm ready.
I'm sorry to inconvenience you, Mrs. Magwick, but it's...
I know. It's your duty. Well, what Rob tells you is true. We were drinking cocktails. Oh, yes, I drink them occasionally. We were drinking our second when it happened.
Have you ever seen this before?
A little white box. Let me look. No, I don't believe I have.
It's the box the poison was in.
Oh. Where did you find it?
On the table where the cocktail shaker and glasses were, slipped in behind the flower piece.
I see.
Mrs. Magwick, I want you to help me.
I'll be pleased to in any way, Inspector.
There were 4 of you in that room. No one came in and no one left. One of the 4 was poisoned. Who did it?
That's a strange question to ask me.
The murdered man was your son.
And so it's natural I should want his murderer discovered. Is that it? Well, perhaps that is true. But what are the others? Rob is my son too, remember? And Jill, she's as close to me as a daughter. She always has been.
You brought her up, didn't you?
Yes, she's the daughter of a very dear friend. I brought her here when her parents were killed years ago. So you see...
You'll tell me nothing.
Just let us say there is nothing I can tell you.
I wondered about that afterwards. Wondered if the old lady did know something. But I knew it was no use pressing the matter. She wasn't strong physically. But I had a pretty strong conviction that when it came to shielding one of her children, well, she'd be tough all right. So I went to see Jill Magwick. I'd seen her often before. Her photo quite often adorned the social pages of our Sunday newspapers. Not that I'm addicted to that sort of reading, but well, Jill Magwick was one girl you'd notice anywhere.
There's nothing I can add. And I've told you I've never seen that box before.
How long have you been married, Mrs. Magwick?
About 5 years.
Were you happy?
Why, yes.
You don't seem too certain.
Well, your question was so sudden. Don was a good husband. Yes, we were happy.
Have you any idea how this murder happened?
It couldn't have been murder, Inspector. I know it couldn't.
Why are you so sure?
None of us would kill Don, even though we all...
You'll what?
Nothing.
Hated him. Is that it?
I didn't say so.
No, but that's what you meant, isn't it? Isn't it?
No, it isn't.
What did you mean, Mrs. Magwick?
You're trying to trick me. I won't answer your questions. Leave me alone.
What's going on here? Jill, dear, what's the matter?
Oh, don't let him ask me any more questions. I'm afraid, Rob, I'm afraid.
It's all right, darling. I'll stay with you. What have you been saying to her?
I'm trying to find out who murdered your brother. It's my duty to question you all.
Questions? Why can't you leave the family alone? We've told you all there is to tell.
I don't think so.
What do you want to know?
A number of things. For a start, why is Mrs. Magwick afraid?
My sister-in-law is in a highly nervous condition. It's only natural she should be upset. After all, Don was her husband.
Whom she hated?
Who told you that? Jill...
I didn't say that. I didn't.
No, perhaps not in words, but your manner left little doubt as to your feelings about your husband.
Such suppositions are rather dangerous, don't you think?
Not as dangerous as concealing evidence. By the way, Mr. Magwick, your brother was a fairly wealthy man. Who gets his money?
Now, look here. I consider that question...
I don't want your opinions. I want facts. Who gets the money?
Confound you!
Please, Rob. I do, Inspector. I get Don's money.
I see. Enough to make you independent?
What do you mean?
Look here. Are you suggesting...
I'm suggesting nothing. I only know that one of you killed Donald Magwick.
We didn't, Inspector. None of us did it. Why can't you leave us alone?
I will, Mrs. Magwick, when the murderer of your husband is standing in the dock. Well, there I was, up against a solid wall. I interviewed those three over and over again and got nowhere. Certainly looked as though I'd have to solve the case the hard way, with the usual routine investigations and questions. So I made a list and started off. First, there was Dolly, the maid.
Oh, no, sir. After I took in the drinks, I didn't go back into the room. Not right in, that is.
Oh, what do you mean, Dolly?
Well, I went to the door when old Mrs. Magwick had her attack.
What attack?
Didn't anyone tell you, sir? I thought they'd have been sure to tell you. She had a fainting attack. Gets them sometimes, she does. I was passing, and Mr. Don, he calls out to me to get her smelling salts, so I ran upstairs and got them.
And you didn't take them into her?
No, sir. Mr. Don was at the door. He took them from me.
Now, Dolly, I want you to think carefully. When you were at the door, you could see into the room, couldn't you? Now, what did you see? Try and remember everything.
No, sir. I didn't see anything much. Just Mr. Rob and young Mrs. Magwick fixing the cushions of the lounge. I suppose they were making it comfortable so that old Mrs. Magwick could lie down.
Now, Mr. Don was at the door. Where was Mrs. Magwick?
Let me see. Oh, yes. She had a hand to her head and was slumped into a chair next to the table with the drinks on it.
The next step was to try and trace the origin of the cyanide that had brought about Magwick's death. I obtained photographs of the three Magwicks and started on my rounds. I reasoned that cyanide must have been purchased somewhere. Well, I didn't meet with any success, though. Either no one had bought the cyanide, or the purchaser certainly had not been one of my suspects. The second afternoon, I dropped into a chemist's shop in the nearby city of Belchester, a shop I'd overlooked.
Good afternoon, sir. What can I do for you?
My name's Cole. These are my credentials.
Oh, yes, sir. How can I help you?
Would you serve a customer with potassium cyanide?
Reluctantly, sir, and only when I was sure the use was a legitimate one. You know, it's used as a reducing agent in photography.
Yes, I see. I wonder if you can remember a potassium cyanide purchase made probably around about 5 days ago.
Excuse me, sir, while I have a look at the drug register.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, yes, sir. I'll soon be able to tell you. 5 days ago. Yes, that would be about the 9th or 10th. Yes, here we are. Purchased in the name of D.C. Bellingmore, Conington.
The name and address don't mean anything. They could be a fake. Look at these 3 photos and tell me if you recognize any of the people as the purchaser of the cyanide.
The man in this photograph reminds me of the person, but no, I don't think he was the one.
Not very encouraging. But at last I got a break. You know, solving a murder is 2 parts routine and 1 part luck. If you're lucky, you get onto a lead, and if you work hard, that lead gets you somewhere. Perhaps. I decided to pay another visit to the Magwicks. It was a hot day, and the big front door was wide open. I walked in, and they didn't hear me coming.
I'm so worried.
It's all right, darling.
Stay close to me, won't you? That detective, he frightens me.
I won't leave you. I won't leave you ever.
What's going to happen, Rob?
I'll tell you what's going to happen. As soon as all this talk dies down, we're going away. We're going on a nice long trip. A honeymoon.
But the police, what are they going to do?
Oh, they'll drop the investigation any time now. They can't find out anything. They can't prove anything.
I hope you're right.
I know I'm right. You'll see. In another month, it'll all be over and forgotten.
Rob,
What is it?
how did it happen? I've thought and thought.
Don't think any more about it, darling. Don is dead, and that's all.
It's terrible. He was my husband. For 5 years he was my husband. And yet I can't find tears to shed for him.
No, I'm not surprised. He was a liar, a cheat.
Oh, don't, darling, don't talk like that.
Why not? It's true, isn't it? I'll be honest with you. I'm not sorry he's dead. For years, he's made all our lives a misery. Sometimes I've wondered if he weren't a little mad. No, I'm not sorry he's dead. For all our sakes, I'm not sorry. We can be happy now, you and I and Mother. We can be so happy.
Do you think if that detective found out about everything? What Don was like and how we all hated him? Do you think they'd do anything?
Jill, darling, as I've already said, there's nothing they can do. Nothing at all.
But that's just where Robert Magwick was wrong. 2 days later, he was arrested for the murder of his brother.
We will continue the mystery of Magwick Manor in just a moment. But first, your announcer. We continue the mystery of Magwick Manor.
I can't say I was very happy about the arrest of Robert Magwick. There were still a lot of loose threads, still a lot we didn't know. For one thing, the chemist had not been able to identify him positively as the purchaser of the cyanide. That was the most important thing. But at the trial, when Jill Magwick was being examined by the Crown Prosecutor Edward King, KC...
Mrs. Magwick, I want you to take your mind back to Thursday the 10th, the day before your husband's death. Did the accused go out on that day?
Yes. He went into the city. They both went into the city.
Both?
Both Robert and my husband.
You and Mrs. Magwick Sr., do you frequently go to the city?
Oh, no. Mother's not strong enough to go out much, and I rarely leave her.
I see. Then it would seem that the accused could have bought the potassium cyanide on the 10th or even before.
No, he didn't buy it. I know he didn't.
You married your husband during the war, didn't you, Mrs. Magwick?
Yes, that's right.
The accused was away at the time, wasn't he?
Yes, he was listed as missing.
Now, Mrs. Magwick, before the accused went away, wasn't it a fact that you and he were engaged?
Yes.
But as soon as he went away, you married his brother.
I thought Robert was dead. Don told me he'd never come back.
Why did he tell you that?
He always wanted to marry me. He was jealous of Robert. He lied to me. He tricked me into marrying him.
Silence. Silence in court.
And so, this man, coming back from the war, finds that the woman he loves has been tricked by the man he hates.
They didn't hate each other, not then.
But they hated each other at the time the accused was murdered.
Yes. No, I don't know. Oh, leave me alone. Leave me alone.
Cross-examination like that sickens me. Here was a decent girl being crucified by the processes of law. Still, murder is pretty dirty itself, and King had his job to do. Next came old Mrs. Magwick.
Mrs. Magwick, on what terms were your two sons?
They were not friendly.
Did they openly fight or have words?
Not very often.
I put it to you that your son Robert hated his brother.
We all hated him.
We, Mrs. Magwick? You mean you hated your son also?
As much as a mother can ever hate her son. It's hard for me to say this, but Don was, well, he was not a nice person.
Your son, the accused, is very fond of you.
He's devoted to me.
And the murdered man was not?
I'm afraid not.
So that this would be yet another reason for the accused to wish his brother dead.
Rob did not kill his brother.
Mrs. Magwick, I want you to think back. Did you ever see any poison in your home?
Yes.
What kind of poison?
I don't know.
Could it be potassium cyanide?
I understand now it was cyanide.
You understand now? You mean you did not know what it was when you saw it?
That is right.
Shall we say that you saw this little white box I'm holding? That you saw it and did not know what it contained?
Not until the inspector told me.
I see. You did see this box before the murder?
Yes. Yes, I did. When I was first asked about it, I couldn't remember the shock and everything. But afterwards, well, I recalled it to mind.
Where did you see it?
My son had it.
You mean the accused?
No, sir. I mean Donald.
Silence. Silence in court.
The murdered man had this box. Are you sure?
Quite sure. I remember distinctly seeing Donald with it.
This was a puzzling, unexpected turn of events. I saw King take a handkerchief from under his robes, mop his brow as the judge adjourned the trial. It was well past the luncheon break. I think everyone was glad to have a bit of time to digest the old lady's evidence. It certainly was a surprise. As I walked out of the court, I remembered something. Something someone had said.
The man in this photograph reminds me of the person. But no, I don't think he was the one.
It was the chemist. Cursing myself for a fool, I grabbed a photograph of the murdered man and one of Robert Magwick, and then quickly took a taxi to the shop. Remember the other day when I was in here, I wanted you to identify a person who had purchased potassium cyanide?
Yes, sir. Indeed I do, sir.
Well, this was the man. Now, remember that you said that while there was a likeness, you thought he wasn't the one.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Then closely look at this other photo and see if you recognize this man.
Yes, that's him. That's the one who bought the potassium cyanide. I remember now. He said he wanted it for his brother. He needed a reducer for developing some photos. That's right, he wanted it for his brother.
The court resumed late. I imagine counsel for the defense was getting ready to make the most of Mrs. Magwick's statement that she'd seen her son Don with the poison. Me? I was trying hard to work out just why he'd bought the potassium cyanide. We'd considered the question of suicide over and over, but had rejected it. Had Rob actually commissioned his brother to buy his own death weapon? Well, I was still puzzling these points when...
Silence. Silence in the court.
Mrs. Magwick, this morning you told us that you saw this box which contained the potassium cyanide in the possession of your son, Don. When?
The night of his death,
I see. And where did you see it?
while we were in the drawing room.
Perhaps you could tell us about it, in your own words.
We were in the drawing room. I was sitting near the table where the drinks were. Rob and Jill were across the room on the lounge. Don was near me. He was pouring the drinks. He seemed a little worried that night, and once he pulled a handkerchief out of his pocket quickly. There was something wrapped in that handkerchief. It almost dropped to the floor, but
Go on.
he saved it. He was careful not to touch it. He didn't think anyone noticed, but I did. I saw it all, in the mirror just near me. It was the box, that box there. But I assure you there was no way that Rob could have got that box from Don that night.
Well, King cross-examined her and questioned her, but he couldn't shake her story. He recalled Jill, who swore that Rob had never left the lounge. Even Dolly's story tended to confirm this. Then there was the chemist who identified the picture of the dead man. So it wasn't surprising when...
Gentlemen of the jury, how find you the prisoner?
We find the prisoner not guilty.
So that was the end of the Magwick case. But it still puzzled me. You see, all along I'd had a theory. I'd rejected it in my mind dozens of times, but it kept coming back. So once more I went to Magwick Manor. I found the old lady in the drawing room.
Inspector, how nice of you to call. Excuse me not rising, but this is one of my bad days. Sit down. I'm about to have tea.
Thank you. I wonder if you wouldn't mind if I asked you a few questions, Mrs. Magwick. I know the case is closed, but
Of course not. I've been expecting this call from you.
Well, why didn't you mention that incident of the box before the trial?
Perhaps I hoped I'd never have to mention it. I didn't realize that the case against Rob was so strong.
Or was it because you saw more in that mirror than you told?
What do you mean?
You saw Don put that poison in Rob's drink, didn't you?
How did you guess?
Well, it's obvious now. That drink was intended for Rob. Don bought the poison for his brother, he said, and he poured the drinks.
Yes, Inspector, you're right. You see, even though Don had taken all he could from Rob, he wasn't satisfied. He knew that Jill hated him and loved his brother. He also knew that when I died, my share of the Magwick business would go to Rob. He couldn't bear to share anything Don couldn't.
I see. And so he planned to commit murder. Mrs. Magwick, when did you have your attack? When did you feel faint? Before or after you saw all this?
It was just afterwards.
Then that means...
What does it mean, Inspector?
Don was at the door taking your smelling salts from Dolly. Where did he put the glasses after he poured the drinks?
Rob's was at the end of the table. Mine and Jill's were together. They were very small ones. Don's was in the center, just near the flower piece.
So that while Jill and Rob were fixing the cushions on the lounge and Don was at the door, you would have ample opportunity to change the glasses.
Inspector, will you take tea with me?
I don't think so, Mrs. Magwick. I think I must...
You know, tomorrow I go to hospital. I'm to have an operation, a serious operation. For some time, my doctors have told me that it will be dangerous for me to have it. I love life. And up till now, I've agreed with the doctors that it would be best for me not to take the risk.
And now?
I have insisted on the operation. The doctors think there is a chance, but somehow, Inspector, I don't think I will ever come out of hospital.
I see.
Is there anything else?
Oh, nothing. Only... I'd like to have that cup of tea you offered me. right. She died 2 weeks later. The papers of the Magwick case were finally filed away. True story never revealed. Perhaps there were others who guessed the truth. I don't know. I've kept the old lady's secret. Somehow I felt I had to.
I'll return in a moment with further news of this series. But first, your announcer.
The court is adjourned.
The judge departs, the jury is discharged, the judgment has been given. Another human story is over until the law of the land is challenged again, and we are privileged to hear once more at this time, Dramas of the Courts. This feature is a Grace Gibson radio production produced by Reg Johnston.